Hello. Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the first panel of the day. We have a few people that will be joining us in this panel today. Today is about building the creative economy in digital Africa. What's that all about? Africa creative potential by 2030 will hit about $100 billion. How do we effectively harness this? How do we project Africa to its full potential? We're not just going to have a conversation today, but we want to be able to have a call to action on the right process we need to follow to be able to achieve this. Africa is an emerging economy, they say, but we're in the process of making it a lot better, a lot bigger. And as we reach that full potential, we want to have that conversation on what the possibilities. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. We're going to start from the left. We're going to start with the ladies first, down to the right. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Judith Okonkwo. I'm the founder of Emisi 3D. We're an ecosystem developer for the extended reality technologies, so augmented, virtual, and mixed reality all across the African continent.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shaina Silva. I am the founder and CEO of the She Builds Global Initiative, which is a platform that invests in women entrepreneurs and creators of color around the world.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maurice Otieno. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I lead an organization called Baraza Media Lab, which is basically a media and creative development space where we do lots of training programs and research for the media industry. We've been in existence post-COVID. That's late 2020. And since then, we've have 6 locations with over 10,000 people trained and worked with within those time period.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sola. I'm the CEO for Pernod Ricard Africa. Pernod Ricard is a spirits and wines company, the second largest in the world, and I manage the Africa continent.
Thank you very much, everyone. So now the first step we want to go into, I'll start off with you, Judith. We speak of emerging technology. How can we harness this emerging technology in the continent? What's your viewpoint on this?
I love that you're asking me that question. I mean, you already know I'm all out for immersive technologies, but I think when you think about the creative economy today on the continent, you're thinking about how our creatives are thinking about things like not just immersive technologies, but also artificial intelligence and blockchain, for example. And I think if there's one thing that we will all acknowledge about the continent is that we have, a youth population that is very curious, has incredible innate talent, and is really raring to go. And when I say raring to go, what I mean is looking for all of the opportunities to access these technologies, to leverage them for all of the ways they can actually impact and accelerate their craft when it comes to being a creative. And I think already on the continent, we're starting to see some really fantastic examples. I'm going to highlight 2 from Nigeria, which I think probably a few people know. So the first, and this is now going to immersive media and 360 video. There's a filmmaker on the continent called Joel Kachi Benson, who had spent much of his career as a documentary filmmaker, and then about 2018, 2019, started to explore with 360, got his first 360 camera, started experimenting and shooting, and then he was going up to a city in northeastern Nigeria called Chibok to do a regular 2D documentary. He came and talked to me about it, and he was like, do you think this is something we can also capture in 360? And of course, it was like, of course, we must. So alongside, the regular cameras, we took up a 360 camera and, captured some incredible footage to tell the story of Chibok. And as most of you know, Chibok is where the schoolgirls were unfortunately kidnapped in 2014. So to go into Chibok and tell the story from the perspective of those who were still waiting, the parents, the mothers. He told that story. It went out on the film festival circuit and truly unprecedented at the Venice Film Festival. It won a Golden Lion in 2019. And, that nothing like that had ever happened for, our creatives on the continent. In a similar vein, we have another young sort of like creative who started experimenting with artificial intelligence. Back in the day, as we started to see the rise of all of the AI capability that we can now access, and started what became a viral sort of like fashion show of the elderly. I don't know if many of you remember that, but it really sort of like got people talking, because of course people at first were like, is this real? Is this not, And then it turned out that he had done it all with AI, but these really, really gorgeous images of elderly Africans in gorgeous, gorgeous African attire. That took off. He got global coverage, BBC, CNN, you can imagine. But what's really interesting about that is not only did that start his journey into really exploring all that technology could do to help his craft, but it has also meant that he's done work in places like Hollywood now, off of the reputation that he's built from doing that kind of creative work. And I think these are just a few examples that show how emerging technologies give us the opportunity to really accelerate potential on the continent. So often we have had to contend with like a lot of infrastructural challenges when it comes to creating and putting our things out in the world. And what the digital economy now is allowing us to have these pathways where we can connect to our audiences more directly, which I think is very important, but also these tools that allow us to completely expand what is possible. So for example, we all know, of course, that in Nigeria, Nollywood is, celebrated as the second biggest sort of like film industry in the world. But there's been a lot of like talk about the quality of production that comes out of it. Rapid shooting because there's rapid output and all of that. And now you have the potential to really, really increase the quality with things like virtual production. So I think when we stop and think about it for a moment, we see these emerging technologies as, areas in which we must invest if we are to realize the potential of the creative economy that you talked about for the continent.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That was quite explanatory. Now, when we talk about connectivity, we talk about access, storytelling. But something comes to mind is the people we're trying to have that conversation with. I'll go on to you, Shaina. In terms of strategic positioning, how can we as a continent position ourselves, just like Judith said about the creator, position ourselves to be receivers of such possibilities that are growing in the continent?
Yes, so I think many of you here might be Nigerian. Raise your hand if you're Nigerian. Usually 50% of the room. Naija. So Disney partnered with a Nigerian studio and produced an animated series called Iwaju not too long ago. And the star of that animated series was a young girl named Tola. And it was the first time that we had seen a African young girl in technology as a superhero being featured in a Disney caliber film. And when I say caliber, I mean it has global reach, the quality is good, the sound is good, and everybody knows about it because it has marketing backing. And that was a huge success story for the Nigerian studio, but also for African people, but also for African girls and women. Because how many superheroes have you heard of or seen that were featuring African girls or women? Raise your hand if you know more than one or two. None. So when we talk about storytelling and the creative economy and how do we position ourselves strategically, one of them is partnerships with global platforms like Disney, right? Taking a small studio in Lagos, producing animated series, telling uniquely African stories, talking about uniquely African challenges, putting women and girls at the forefront, and then setting it on a global stage that is accessible to any and everyone through a partnership like Disney. We need more of that. So that's one example. I'll give you another example, which is Black Panther. Before Black Panther, we didn't have too many Black superheroes that were so globally celebrated coming out of the US. It was mostly the Superman, the Batman, typical white male images. And then comes along Black Panther with a very strong identity that is uniquely African, but that also creates a sort of friction line with a brother or cousin rather, that was an African living in America and that was having the American experience. And through this incredible storyline, we were able to learn a little bit about the African experience, the experience of the African growing up in America, but also of the friction that happens between different types of Black people all over the world, whether you're Caribbean, African, African American, of the diaspora, and all of that was playing out in a single film. But what made this film successful was not that we were addressing all of these things in a nuanced way, in a funny and creative way. It was the fact that a lot of the African culture that we were not used to seeing on that global stage through Marvel was beautifully put on display by an African-American director, Ryan Coogler. People started to see Africa, African fashion, African music, African art differently because of that film. In 2018, Black Panther became the second highest grossing film in America. The first to reach $1 billion in 26 days. That is the fastest of any film in that time. So when we talk about the creative economy, when we talk about strategically positioning the creative economy, I've given two examples of the potential that it has. One that is uniquely African, partnering with an American platform, and one that is of African, an African story. Black Panther is an African character, but created and produced by an American platform. So we have the opportunity, all of us that are supporting and enabling the creative economy, to see it not just as a vessel for entertainment, but as a conduit for helping to shift mindsets, because this is what Black Panther has done. It invoked conversation around friction between Black people, which is very real. But it did it in an edutainment kind of way. You didn't even know you were being educated, if that's a word I can use. Educated, right? So when we think about the creative industry and the potential that it has, being able to change perception, being able to change mindset, in a way reformatting our operating system, which is the mind, it has incredible potential if we are able to position it properly with the right global platforms that already exist.
Thank you. That's quite educative. And it's good that the perception and works behind the fact that we don't know this, that it's actually being affected by us, but certain things that we watch, and we see that play out every single day. We saw, like you said, we saw the infusion of Black Panther, and it affected Black kids in America, and that was very, very unique to see. And it's similar to what happened with Coming to America. And when we tell those stories, it shows a different light. And now this comes to mind when America is amazing. But when we now look into the continent of Africa, one of the problems I see, it's infrastructure. And having movies done in Cape Town is quite amazing, and the ecosystem of what infrastructure brings on creativity in the subsectors is very, very vital. And that's when I want to take this to you, Maurice. How can we, as a continent, be able to showcase our creativity with the fact that infrastructure is particularly a problem in the creative industry, in the creative space? What's your thoughts on this?
Thank you. When you look at infrastructure, I use the analogy of cooking. If you're going to make food, you need a cooking pot that you're using. How do you start making food without that cooking pot? And the infrastructure for me is that base, the most needed functions for you to be able to operate well. Now, back at home, you find there are very few countries that are having the proper infrastructure. When I talk infrastructure, I'm talking physical spaces. I'm talking about even right policies to support that. And I think it's few countries. You mentioned Cape Town and South Africa as a whole, which has a proper infrastructure. And you see most movies that are globally acclaimed being produced in South Africa. And that goes a long way to enable that ecosystem to thrive, right? And I think it's a mindset shift in terms of what we invest in. I'll speak about Kenya particularly. All my uncles and aunties there are really investing in money in real estate and mostly in strip malls. So we have strip malls in every 5 minutes. There's a strip mall in Nairobi and Kenya as a whole. And you wonder how much are people buying, and most of it are 80% empty. Then you come back to the political side. Every politician who's getting or trying to get into power, the first thing they promise is like, I'll build you guys a stadium. That's okay. I don't know how many countries. Africa is almost like a country at some point. It's almost like all our politicians are in a classroom and they're learning on what to say, So they're building all these stadiums, and no one is putting money in anything like theater. No one is putting money in any entertainment spaces. And that, for me, is a problem. I mean, I'm not saying that sports should not be invested in. It should be, because it's an integral part of us. But when COVID happened, we all know what the creative industry did for us, for our mental being. That's the time that I think YouTube clocked the highest number of watch time. So it was not only good for the money bit, but it's good for our mental health also, to have a very thriving creative industry. And that, I think, ties into your strategic conversation. When we talk about strategy, right? We don't just invest in creative for entertainment's sake. We're investing in it as a mental health issue. We're investing in it as an economic issue. We're investing in it as a dignity issue. Because right now, most content creators across the continent have given Africa what we lack the most, dignity. Because they create content that shows who we are, where we are, and how we live our life. And for me, the infrastructure could mean, how do you partner with Panod here for entertainment spaces and build that culture? How do you partner with phone companies to be able to lower the cost of phones so that people can produce more content? How do you build more filmmaking studios and theaters within these places? We are the only country, at least for Kenya, where an estate is designed, but nobody thinks about any other social activities. In fact, sometimes they even don't make the walk path. Like, you can't walk, you're walking on the road, right? So if we don't think about basic issues like that as a country, as a people, we are the ones who are taking away our own dignity. So I'll urge all our uncles and aunties, please invest in theater. Please invest in poetry spaces and comedy. They make money, and you'll make money, rather than putting it in a land that probably you'll not use for your lifetime.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Africa has come a long way, and Africa is known for its mineral resources, but also Africa has something that no other place in the world has, no other continent has. It has a growing young generation of people who are creative, who are established in their thought process, and they are ready to take the world by storm. And infrastructure definitely is needed. And this comes to mind on investments. And investing in creativity is very vital, and this is where I want to come to you, Shola. You invested in a musician called Davido. How many of you know Davido? Yeah, yeah. It's one of the favorite drinks in Nigeria used to be Hennessy, and Davido took up Martell, and every young boy you see wants to drink Martell. Every man you want to see. Forgive me. Every man you see wants to drink Martell. And
Boys drink. It's a
there are songs now about Martell that didn't exist before. And there's a saying that after Martell, blah, 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 saying I don't want to go into that. But in terms of the future of creativity, as African culture is now becoming pop culture, where you see the likes of Gucci and Louis Vuitton now taken into African print as a new source in terms of where creativity is heading. Where do you see the future of creativity heading in the continent that you've invested so much in, just like you say about infrastructure and manpower? Also, where do you see the future of creativity in the continent?
Okay, just to start, we don't sell to boys. You have to be 18 and above, depending on the country you're in. 21 in the US, I believe. And we also are very big advocates of responsible consumption. Okay? Back to the question. So I think everybody knows that the continent we've got a very young population, right? The average age in Africa is 19. I think somebody was saying that. You've heard that like 600 times this week. But it's true. Yeah. And we will be the youngest continent in the world. The average age in Europe is 41. So believe that. So how do you build for the future when your continent is that young? You have to plan for them, right? The whole Afrobeat movement didn't start in a day. I think even 10 years ago, nobody wanted to listen to Afrobeats. But it's a mindset shift for Africa, for Africans, for us to believe in ourselves first, right? If we believe in what we have, then we take the fight to the rest of the world. And that's what happened with Afrobeat. You go to any club in Nigeria 10 years ago, they weren't playing all the international songs. They were playing local songs, even though it never transcended. But the strong belief, the consistency, and I think one thing that we need to understand is the consistency. If we're not consistent, we won't get there. And it's like you were saying in terms of storytelling. How are we telling our own stories? And our future is going to be based on that. And a lot of people, if you listen to the African folk stories back in the day, we have Thor. It's called Shango in Nigeria, right? That's our story. And you were talking about Iwaju and how we've kind of taken those African stories, transcended it, made it modern, and now that's the conversation that we're having. So from a future point of view, it's about how do we navigate the young generation? How do we change that mindset in terms of the way they think? How do we start educating them? So it's not about AI today, it's about what AI is going to be tomorrow, and we begin to close those gaps now. So as we build the infrastructure, we're not just talking about infrastructure for today. We're talking about infrastructure for tomorrow. So it's not the production houses that are doing things the same way now. It's always anticipating what's going to happen in the future. And it's about that consistency in whether it's investment. I think there's a lot of finance conversations that need to come in. There's a lot of policy conversations that need to come in. There's a lot of, when we talk about infrastructure, for example, in Africa, so according to AI, which is ChatGPT, internet penetration on the continent is only, anybody guess?
40%.
38%. In Africa. What do you think the rest of the world is?
70%.
You've been ChatGPT.
I am the chat.
It is actually 70%. So you can imagine on the continent, it's only 38%. We have a young generation. They're 19 and below right now. So there's no access to the internet for a lot of those people. What do you think our ability to take everything that we're saying, if we were up to 70% right now, we will be a big global player. But we're not competing with the rest of the world at the moment. So building the infrastructure, ensuring that we plan for the future, and we have consistency. So it's not just, we're not doing it just because we want to make a community happy. We have to be consistent in the way we engage, the partnerships we have, the relationships we build, the finance that we invest. And like my brother said here, please bring your money from all the, what did you call it? The places, and invest in the generation, in the young talent. That's what's going to make Africa ready for the future.
Thank you very much. I stand corrected about boys. Now, a few things we've said. First of all, we talked about the first step I heard was connectivity with Judith. Then I heard about partnership from Shaina. Then I heard about infrastructure from Maurice, and Sola has come up with grassroots development and engagement, and how policies can shape the future of the continent, and how infrastructure also is very, very vital, because with the amount of penetration boils down to education again. And this is where I want to come back to you again, Judith. In terms of connectivity and immersion of new technologies and using that, what is the scope that is needed from a governmental perspective and private sector that we can infuse to actually change the dynamics of the continent?
Fantastic question. Thank you for that. This week, if you've been going to different meetings, you've probably heard a lot about digital public infrastructure, because I think all across the world, and particularly on the internet, on the African continent, we're thinking about really how do we start to put in place really the basic foundations, right, to prepare for the future generation that Sola was talking about. In a place like Nigeria, there are a few initiatives that are happening already. So there's Project Bridge, which is 90,000 kilometers of fiber that's going to be laid, which is, think about to triple kind of current capacity, right? Initiatives like that. There's a national AI strategy, for example, which is unprecedented. And just this past weekend, the Ministry of the Digital Economy announced an atlas, which is Nigeria's multimodal large language model, and I think that's the first of any nation on the African continent. And I mention all these because I just want to highlight the fact that there's a ministry that's thinking actively about what sort of infrastructure must we create now to make sure that the youth population that we're endlessly talking about actually have a future. Alongside that, we've got to think, I think, more intentionally, right, about how we're connecting the dots. So I've been talking about the Ministry of the Digital Economy, but also when it comes to the creative sector, they're also thinking about what that handshake looks like between digital and the creative economy. In Nigeria, there's now a national council that is mandated with drawing up a roadmap for what we describe as our creative technology futures. And what that really is saying, what are all the different pieces that we need? And I think, Sola, you addressed many of them. What are the investment pieces? What are the educational pieces? What are the academic pieces? What is the handshake with industry that we need so that we're making sure that the basics are in place? And it's kind of like, a whole range of conversations, everything looking at how do we make sure that creatives on the continent have the right information about IP and have the right regulatory environment to, ensure that their IP is safeguarded, right? What are we doing around issues like privacy and trust when we talk about all of these new technologies, particularly when we consider the fact that most of these new technologies, most of the platforms we're building on are not homegrown, And so there are a lot of issues there that we must consider. And there's a lot of educating that must happen for our people so they know how best to engage with this. So I think for sure we will see a lot of public-private partnerships. A lot of this infrastructure is being built in the private sector, but the government will need to help us with the guardrails, if you will, that will allow people to understand how best to navigate it. But I think in all of this, the most important voice will be the voice of the people and the voice of the youth. And this is one thing I say in every room, for young people to please continually speak up, let us know what you need and how you need it. But then for this room more broadly, to know that in a place like Nigeria, for example, that Council for the Creative Technology Futures is very actively thinking about the different partnerships that will advance this and the different ways we can work with institutions to make sure that we have a creative economy that lives up to your statistics.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Judith, and it's a pleasure to be with you on that council.
Yeah.
So in 1 minute, Cheyenne, because we're running a little bit on time, we speak on education. We talk about how this should play a vital role, and that's what Judith has expanded on a little bit. Who do you think should be the driving force to actually sell this type of message in the continent? Should it be governmental only? Should it be the private sector only? What is the focus and what is the strategy that we need right now to be able to educate our people? Because in the continent, as much as you know it, it's while we're still very open-minded, some sets of people still have the myopic way of thinking that Maurice explained a little bit about building certain houses rather than focus on infrastructure that is vital. How do you think we can push this forward?
Yes, great question. I don't think there can be a single mouthpiece for this because there will be different perspectives. So the creators who are building platforms or who are creating content or making films or making music are going to speak through that vessel, and that message is going to get across, and they're going to build influence around that. But we also need government to have a voice and show their leadership and show that they're creating a regulatory environment that has rules and regulations that are enabling that ecosystem to thrive. If they are not present and if they don't have a voice, then those creators may feel like they may not be safe in that environment and may want to go somewhere else where they might be safe. And in the African context, you get brain drain as a result of that. So we need the government to have a voice. We also need the private sector to have a voice, to show that they are investing, to show that they want to partner, to show that they want to consume. So they need to stand just like Sola here has invested in the African creative economy. That is a voice right there. And that is a partnership right there. So each stakeholder in the ecosystem has a role to play. The media as well has a role to play. I know in countries like mine, I'm from Haiti, we don't have a very strong media ecosystem. And so when we think about Haiti, it's usually a very somber narrative. We don't have a lot of stories coming out of Haiti about people doing great things, putting Haiti on the map. So it makes you think that it doesn't exist when in fact it does. So the media has a role to play to put a spotlight on those things that are happening, whether it is from the private sector, from the government, or from the creators themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Maurice, in 1 minute. Now, you spoke a lot about infrastructure, and we've spoken about how to get this done and how the advice you gave. But now we're not moving into a step or a place where we actually need a call to action on making this happen on the continent. We can't wait to keep on talking about this conversation. We have amazing people right here. What is the flow process from your thought process on what is the next steps in terms of a call to action on making this happen on the continent for infrastructure?
I think it's similar to what Shaina was talking about. Like, for me, for infrastructure, my call to action was already there. The aunties and uncles, stop investing in strip malls, right? In Nairobi, at least. But yeah, I think it's more about, like, for example, I will not, I'm looking at it more of like a public-private kind of partnership where the government sets policies and space for people to invest in things like that and benefit from it. and recognizing that, yes, as much as it's a commercial endeavor, if it's tax breaks and whatever, but there is more than just the commercial returns that these spaces give. They build a whole ecosystem. They shape narratives of how the continent is seen and our cities are seen. I'll give a quick example, half a minute, of what has happened in Nairobi. So in Nairobi, our current governor got into power in 2022. And one of the things that the community asked him to do is, can you waive, usually taking a picture in the middle of Nairobi around government buildings was frowned upon. And you are charged about $70 to take a picture a day. So when he came in, he said, hey, that's not allowed in my city. Guys can walk around and take pictures. And they allow people to come in on Sundays to take pictures. If you go to Nairobi today on Sunday, it's beautiful. You see young people dancing, people taking pictures, it's safe. And what that has done in turn, it has raised the perception index of Nairobi to be a safe place for tourists and foodies. Now, all of a sudden, Sundays and Saturdays, restaurants are booked just because of a simple one policy that he said, this does not make sense. It's still colonial to be disallowed to take pictures of public places or public buildings. So that's the role of government. Then my uncles and aunties to invest in theaters.
Thank you very much. Back to uncles and aunties, you've heard it. So, Sola, you currently invest in Indian entertainment industry, and you saw a value reason to invest in it, and you're a champion of that aspect. But in terms of a grand design of how brands can actually step into the space, he's talked about the governmental part of it. He talked about the educational part of it and partnership. He talked about the connectivity part of it. How can brands step in that space like you were doing to actually amplify what government is doing? So when those policies come true, and we have the likes of Canex putting out $250 million. How can, for the creative industry, how can brands not say, oh no, we don't want to do this, we don't believe in the creative industry, we don't want to venture into that industry? How can brands step up like you're doing to actually invest in the industry?
I don't think we have 250 million like Canex would. I think it's the belief in terms of what our brands stand for. And a lot of us leverage, whether it's the influencers, the content, it's also how we tell stories. You know, the one thing about brands, it's also about storytelling. It's about experiences. So consumers want experiences. And how do we navigate those? Is we create experiences based on our consumers. So it's telling the Nigerian story, the Kenyan story. It's telling the Haitian story, if that's what it is, but creating those experiences that resonate with our consumers. And the only way you can do it is through the culture. It's through our culture. And you see a lot of brands always talk about they want to be culturally relevant. How do you become culturally relevant if you're not investing in the culture? You know, and people, again, the Afrobeat conversation is about culture. It's about taking that culture and transcending different borders at the end of the day. So as a brand or as brands, that's what it takes. But it's also putting your money where your mouth is. It's also backing that up and be consistent. It's not about for today. Because the challenge is we all want returns, and we want those returns now, actually yesterday. And if those returns don't come, you see a lot of brands change their strategy and they move on to something else. But it's about being consistent. It's about the belief in what you're investing in and knowing that you want to impact culture, and how to do that is being the catalyst, of culture, and you do it through the people or the investments you make and all of that. That's how brands will be impacted. But one thing I just wanted to, one last thing, just a quick takeaway, is for us as Africa, right? We need to break the border conversation as Africans. It's not about Kenya, it's not about Nigeria, it's not about Cape Town or South Africa. It's ensuring that we leverage our strengths. So in business, for example, it's about collaboration, right? It's about collaboration, it's about relationships. And where we see Cape Town being the hub now, we leverage the strengths of Ghana, we leverage the strengths of Nigeria in terms of what they do well to be able to create what we want, whether it's another Iwaju, whether it's another Black Panther. If we don't break the borders and facilitate that cross-border conversation, we won't take Africa to the world the way we want to. And if there's anything we take away from this, is ensuring that Africa is Africa, beyond borders.
Thank you very much. That deserves a round of applause.
Should I repeat? Yes. Oh, hi, everybody. Thank you. So my name is Jennifer. So my name is Jennifer Kaberi. I work with Mtoto News. Please Google us up. So I work with children. We train them on content creation because we believe the digital space, it is their world, and we provide for them a platform on where to upload that content. So content in all formats: video, audio, whatever, animation, and everything. So what I've seen over the years, there's so much emphasis, even in our education, on STEM, okay? And there's very little emphasis on content creation. But in reality, all of us are content creators, okay, in some way. So for me in the panel, my question is, what can we do and how can we convince our governments to be able to invest in education? Like a child wants to be a podcaster, they want to be an artist, they want to be a filmmaker. They will not be discouraged and you told them, oh, you guys want to be like Maurice. Maurice, there's nothing wrong with you. But you understand what I'm saying? So that character on TV that your parent doesn't like. So how can we emphasize that content creation is an industry and it employs like millions and millions of Africans, okay? I'm going to be looking for you for something we are calling Children Creative Council. Thank you.
So 30 seconds to answer this question. We're just running out of time. Thank you. Who wants to answer the question?
So I'll give it a go. And I'll say one thing that I think is already part of the answer is just the numbers that governments are looking at, right? So you were talking about the potential for the creative economy. In a place like Nigeria, they're targeting 2 million jobs in the creative economy by 2030. So we know that we need young people creating content. And I have to say that even when we talk about sort of like all of these emerging technologies, a lot of the emphasis in terms of educating is upskilling young people so they can create content. So I think the narrative already exists. It's just how we amplify it, perhaps so that it's sitting alongside what you're seeing for STEM, because you'll probably know the acronym of STEAM that is being paraded in some circles, which I think is really, really relevant. I know one of the conversations we had when we were even looking at storytelling is the fact that the skills for storytelling, translate across multiple industries. So even if you're thinking about science in its traditional form, you need to communicate science. You need people who will create content for it and tell those stories. So we do need those skill sets across the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I just wanted to quickly, we want to have a call to action from everyone for 30 seconds because we've run out of time. So for 30 seconds, what should we as Africans do for the digital African economy? What's your take on this? 30 seconds, please. I'll start with you, Shaina, first. To take that up for 30 seconds. We practically out of time. Thank you.
So I'm going to use my time not as a call to action, but to answer her question in a second part from Judith. How can we convince our governments to make that important? Having worked at one of the largest social media companies on the planet, I know that child safety is something that we also need to take into consideration when we talk about the creative economy. So it's important that we create space for kids to be able to create content and to express themselves, to have funds that enable us to create ventures around that. But it's a reality that child safety is something that is not looked at or talked about enough when it comes to the internet. So when you have kids creating podcasts and shows, you don't know who's looking, who's watching, and who's a predator. And so the role of government has to also be to look at how to put safety in perspective when we are talking about the creative economy, especially when it comes to kids.
Thank you. So I'll take on to you, Maurice.
Sorry, I'm good. I think I'll yield my time
Okay.
to my own.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to add to your question as well. There's something around formalization of the industry as well that we need the government to support. So at the moment, a lot of the creative industry is very informal.
Yeah.
The content creation conversation is informal. How do we get government to formalize that industry? You know, that it now, if it's formalized, it gives it a higher voice in whatever it is that we're doing. But then on your question, just quickly, I think consistent investment, you know, in this industry will take it to the next level. That will be my call to action, consistent investment.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this first panel today. We basically had a conversation to talk about infrastructure, connectivity, education, and the future of what creativity should look like. It's up to everybody in this room to come up with their own perspective on how to improve between Africa and the diaspora to work together to create a concrete call to action and a possibility for growth, connectivity, partnership. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.